Hello, beautiful angels. This song is just so amazing. It is so heart opening. And for those of you who came live to Bodega Bay, we had Karen Drucker with us. And this was really, for me, the main theme that we have, the gratitude for Mother Earth, gratitude for being here and to be able to be part of this ascension process. It really is amazing. And so today we will do a little bit of an overview of what the ascension process is and also how to move forward now that we actually have new DNA and we have a new spiral of evolution moving through our bodies. So I've heard some other people speak about the spiral, and that always makes me super happy because, it's nice when people all around the world are seeing what's happening within us. And some people call the spiral of evolution within us our personal spiral. And so that's actually a big change. And the changes that have taken place, all of them are huge. They are just so big. And it's good to know that these changes are simply completely, life changing for every molecule of life. Every molecule of life. And so I'm going to start with this beautiful visual that really was given to us here through the Green Tara group and the work that we do of this ascension that we are participating in. Multidimensional reality that is unveiling through us and through many people, of course, in the world are now perceiving themselves as multidimensional beings. It's very complex. I always say the mystery is really big. And these little lives we've been living here on this planet, they didn't seem to be so complex, maybe complicated, but not so complex. It was pretty straightforward. You're born, you're a little kid, you have parents, then you go to school, then you get a job, you get married, you have kids, just like that. And then you retire and eventually you leave the body. So this was pretty much what for so long our DNA was used to. And this ascension process is about an incredible expansion of what really life is. And so I got to know this in this lifetime through meditations. And my first huge experience was when I was a little kid and I started to actually go to another planet. And that was obviously, a multidimensional experience I could not explain. And so it went on. And I realized that if there is one thing we are not, then we are not the person that we think we are, and that we are not these bodies that we think we are, and that we are not this personality self that we think we are, and that we are not these, the roles. And that, when we think of ourselves as a daughter, wife, and mother, or son, father, whatever it is, that's not the truth of us. And so in this ascension process, I also, through these multidimensional experiences, noticed that there is also very different true nature of time. And that what seems to be time here, where, it seems to be moving in a line, right? The birth, the life, and the death, it seems to be like a straight line. You can look at the years. I also noticed that in higher realms, this time doesn't really exist. And so one thing that really always puzzled me in this expanded multidimensional reality is how time doesn't behave the same way when you look from a higher realm to this realm. And that in higher realms, everything seems to be so much slower, but also it seems to be so much more cyclical. And here it seems to be just that straight line. And I have always been meditating like so much that through meditation and different types of meditations, but ultimately the most powerful meditation that I found was simply chanting Om into my third eye, and not out loud, but internally. And there are so many different ways to meditate, of course, but ultimately I found that that was the most powerful thing I've ever done. Just simply focusing into the third eye as if nothing else existed and chanting Om just in my mind. And suddenly these multidimensional experiences happened more and more and more and more. And I just recently actually saw a quote, which was from someone who was like a close disciple of Yogananda. And this person asked Yogananda, Yogananda, is Kriya Yoga, where you do your breathing through the spine, the most powerful technique there is? Or is there something faster? And Yogananda responded and said, there is something faster. And it is focusing on your third eye and chanting Om. So when I saw it, it finally explained to me why simple chanting of Om in the third eye made such a huge difference. So when I started to do that, it was around the year 2018 when I just randomly realized that when we do that for a long time, we actually are able to leave the physical body and go into what first seems like the astral world, but eventually also we expand even beyond the astral and we go into the causal plane. And eventually we actually do have access to even the absolute just by this very simple technique. So as I was since 2018 having these multidimensional experiences, I would say many times a day, just through this simple technique, it was really unbelievable. It was like you just opened the door to this huge cosmic creation and you realize it is complex. It has many dimensions, it has many realms. Within the realms, you had many different worlds, and these worlds are very puzzling because some of them even seem to be parallel realities. But one thing that I also was really puzzled by is that you can travel through time. And so I started to travel through time, not only through space, what I would say, going from one world to the other, but also moving through time and moving into the future, but also being able to go back into the past. And I'm always puzzled by all of this. And so I bring these puzzle pieces myself to this community here. And then all of us together with your puzzle pieces, we actually then are much more capable of creating the big picture. And I don't think we can really fully describe the big picture because the mystery is so big. But at least we get a little understanding of something that might be helpful to all of us. And so when I started to move through time, I realized that the most actually logical explanation I found is that we came from the future. And of course, it's puzzling because, again, when you look at the life we live here, it seems so simple in a way. It seems so easily explainable. And I think that you and me would agree that our ancestors and even us recently would still say this life is really, it's very straightforward. There is no much of a mystery in the human life with the birth, the life, and then the retirement and the death. But I came to the conclusion from what I've seen in these higher realms that we actually did come from the future. And other people obviously have come with the same idea. And I think it was Barbara Marciniak who wrote the Pleiadian books. And I think she came to the same conclusion that actually we came from the future and we came here now to change this past. And that this is not the present moment. And so that is my conclusion about this ascension process, that we came from the future, which to me is much higher dimensional world because it just behaves differently. And we came to change this past so that the earth ascends, so that we do something differently in this timeline. And one of the things that I believe we came here to do is to actually help Divine Mother return into this world. And so that's, for me, Ascension, being here for Divine Mother, being here so that she can return into this world, into our hearts, into the goodness of who we are as her children, her rainbow children. And we are absolutely incredibly successful. And the biggest success that was just accomplished was just really a few weeks ago. And it would seem like, many of us participated in the World Congress on Illumination, whether it was online or in person or not at all even, it doesn't matter. So you would say it was just an event. But actually, as you know, the event itself, to me, is just like portal through which a lot of energy actually was generated. And it was by those who participated, but it was for the entire humanity. And what happened during that week at the World Congress on Illumination is that every molecule of life on this planet was actually transformed and upgraded. It's incredible. And so, this ascension process, that I got to see it from the future, and I know we all did. We are here because of this. I always say, we all have different perception of things, but some of us are designed to see a lot. Some of us are designed to do a lot. Some of us are designed to hold a lot, and so on and so on. And so every single one of us here came fully equipped. And so for me, the equipment in this lifetime was a lot of, going to these different multidimensional realities and being able to come back and bring this information in clarity. And so what I was able to see is that as we came from the future and we came to change the past, we really had to come with the equipment of a pure heart. And that the pure heart is the only way, it's almost like a portal through which Divine Mother could move. And so I call her children, which is us. I call us the rainbow children, because the rainbow light is really the light of creation. And as you know, the divine self, when it channels through us fully, then we simply, by its nature, have a rainbow body that we used to have. And that requires a pure heart, a clean heart, a good heart, a loving heart, a compassionate heart. And one of the things that is really important is the relationship of that heart with nature. And nature always was referred to as the mother, and that is very appropriate. In cosmos, we call her cosmic mother nature. And we can call her the goddess, we can call her Shakti, we can call her Sophia, we can call her the Green Tara. It's all the same force, cosmic mother nature. And this cosmic mother is really the field of manifested creation. And she does manifest herself with those great designs that we know as cosmos. And cosmos as the big multidimensional cosmic reality with all the multiverses within. So every universe, and there are many, is an expression of the mother. And there are beings who are in charge of universes. So we call them the guardians of the universe. They are beings who have incredible consciousness, and they get to be really what I would call it the logos of a universe. All is by design. All is designed, and it is always designed to expand into more. And then within those universes, we have smaller beings, and I met some of those, who are in charge of galaxies. And it's not like a science fiction type of thing. It's so much more about consciousness. That there are beings who have the incredible consciousness to design a galaxy. So think about how many galaxies there are within a universe. And so then we have beings who are in charge of the solar logos. And then we have beings who are in charge of planets, and they are really the spirit or the soul of a planet. And then we get to be these beings here on this planet in these physical bodies. And the physical bodies too have their own soul or spirit, and we call that the body deva. So in this ascension process, it is always about the return of the consciousness of the beings to this big understanding of cosmic creation. So we have been in this world, let's say for millions of years, with so-called fallen, disconnected consciousness. The major disconnect that we recognize in our societies around the world is actually the disconnect from the cosmic Mother Nature. And in smaller, proportions, we can just say disconnect from nature. Now, nature, because she's cosmic in her nature, and then she creates smaller bodies of herself that we call universes and galaxies and solar systems and planetary systems. She is filled with cosmic consciousness. Now, cosmic consciousness is the ultimate consciousness, but it flows through universal consciousness, which has its own nature, but of course it reports up to the most expanded, which is cosmic nature. And then universal consciousness flows through galactic consciousness. Again, galactic consciousness simply being the consciousness of a galaxy, which actually is by design created by the beings in charge of a galaxy. So really depending on the, I would say, responsibility that the consciousness can carry, the beings are then responsible for certain bodies within cosmos. The goal is always to be able to expand beyond all limitations. That means beyond the limitation of this physical body, to expand, to be connected to the planetary body first, to be one with the entire planet, all of us, and then to be one with our solar system, and then to be one with our galactic system, and then to be one with the universe, and then even to go beyond it and to expand to the entire cosmos. That means we truly then become one with cosmic consciousness. In this world, again, you can tell that beings, through what they called civilization, disconnected more and more and more from nature. And very often we would call it advancement. And that is actually the opposite of advancement. We are not to be primitive in the way that we live, but we are to be actually the most advanced. And that is when we put nature first. And that means first consciousness of cosmos and all the way down to the planetary consciousness, which also means unbelievable respect and understanding of all of natural manifestations, which includes things in this world. And I don't want to call it actually things, beings like the trees, the rocks, the plants, the animals, the entire planet, the waters, the 5 elements. And so in an ideal civilization that is advanced, nature always comes first, and then is the creativity in which the being, and we can call it in this world, of course, the human being, understands the forces of nature, and instead of violating them, is actually working with them and integrating all activities and all creativity into nature. That would be a really advanced civilization. Advanced civilizations could have technology if it is needed, but the number one technology would always be mimicking nature, and not just nature that we see here in this world, but mimicking all levels of nature that we spoke about, from cosmic to universal to galactic to solar and planetary. So we are now part of this consciousness that is going to be expanding through us, and it is expanding through our bodies. And that is the crazy thing about this ascension process. So you can see how all the light flows, and it flows finally into that little unit that is to be also of nature, and that is the physical body. Now, the physical body became incredibly manipulated in the past for really millions of years. And it became a problem because it truly became a problem in many different ways. And we spoke about those, but it was where the manipulation took place, so that the body no longer could perform its original intent to be 100% pure and clear receiver of cosmic consciousness. So then we had to develop all these techniques, and we had to develop all the things that we know as, mystical practices and breathing practices, yogic practices, and all of those. You can think of every single actually tradition that we've had on this planet was introduced just so that we can fix a problem that actually possessed the body, and the body was no longer a clean and pure receiver of cosmic consciousness, which would include planetary consciousness. And so then the consciousness of the human being also was completely, fallen. It was not accurate. It was not giving us an accurate picture of who we are. The mind stopped working properly. And instead of being connected to the higher mind of the divine self, we now had the lower human mind, which just would always be so busy thinking about the world the wrong way. So let's take a look at it. Why actually the body originally was designed to just simply receive the fullness of cosmic consciousness, and then what would be our role. So let's go back to the origin, where the human being is connected to all these levels that you see here in this beautiful picture. And the being has an open, sacred heart. When the heart is open, and we are speaking about what people call the mystical heart, the higher heart, the Christed heart, when the heart was originally open like this, the entire system of the physical body also was open. All the channels that we can call today meridians and all the acupuncture point would have been then fully receiving all these layers of creation. And so it was through the body that actually the human being was informed, and through these subtle bodies too. And one of them, the most important one, was the heart. And so that's the truth of the heart knows. When the heart is fully open, it knows. But when it is not fully open, it doesn't know the fullness of who we are. And that's why love became such an important aspect of our spirituality. Loving the Lord, which I would replace the word, I would replace it with loving life with all our heart. Loving life, and I mean the cosmic life, of course, which is the big life. It's the creation. It's us within creation. When we realize who we are as beings within creation, then we are beings within the field of Divine Mother's creation, her manifested creation. And so then what is there not to love? But of course, when the design fell, which means the being no longer was able to receive this information, then the body too became degraded and it no longer worked properly. And that's why we ended up with what we today call life and death, and also disease. So in the original design, we didn't have the birth that we have today. We didn't have death that we have today, but it didn't mean that we would forever exist in the body. We would always exist. We didn't segregate life into life and death. That was actually just the result of the fallen really design. But when we originally were in the original blueprint for us as human beings, we were not defined by birth and death. We existed, and we existed as immortals who knew that they take on a form depending on which world they are embodying into, without the need for birth the way that we know it today, also without the need for death. And so we were transcendent beings. Transcendent beings. That means we would go into a world, embody into a body that was already perfectly prepared for us. It didn't have to go through like childhood, the helplessness of a childhood, having to depend on parents. None of that. We depended on cosmic energy and planetary energy. So the body was just ready for us to embody into as a form. It's almost like going into a car, and the car is ready for you and you get going. And so we would come here. And as long as we wanted to stay in this embodiment and we were experiencing life here, we would keep the form. But if we wanted to transcend, for example, and go to a different world, like let's say in our system, we could go to Sirius, then we would take on a form that is the best as an expression of a different star, different planet, different sun. Always just taking on a form depending on what mission we're going on. Now, our missions were not the way that we know the mission here on planet Earth. Planet Earth is kind of like a rescue mission. Planet Earth is a mission of truly trying to, I would say, save a planet. And so it's a very different mission. So this is a rescue mission, salvation mission. But you could go into planets and worlds where you don't have to be saving anything and trying to rescue anything, because you would go into a world that is complete, which means it has the perfect conditions. And you go there to simply create through consciousness and to be simply experiencing yourself in an embodiment where your task is to experience the power and potential of your consciousness. So there was no need for dysfunction. Dysfunction is not actually natural in cosmos, but of course we did have a problem, and that was the cosmic evil. So cosmic evil created dysfunction as part of its process. It was by design, and it created, a lot of problems in cosmos. But eventually, of course, it affected planet Earth so much. So we are now actually in this year 2024 going through the biggest transformation of all life on planet Earth, and a lot of it is taking place in realms that are not visible to us. And so a lot of the dysfunction that was affecting planet Earth too was actually happening from realms invisible to us. And so the biggest transformation of life is taking place now. And it is happening through those loving, open hearts that you are. Truly. I call it the army of Divine Mother. And that means staying true to love, staying true to oneness, staying true to being caring, compassionate, to be really a source of hope for this world, which it needed. And so the transformation that just took place, it can be described as the end of the battle between the angels and demons, which was not happening exactly here physically, even though it seemed like it, but it was actually an invisible realm that we would call the astral. And so this battle has come to an end, and in a way darkness has fallen, and now we are looking at the world. So let's take a look at the world. The world has always been a mirror of consciousness and unconsciousness. Divine Mother is very much a mirroring force. She always is the mirror of our love, and unfortunately she always also had to become the mirror of that which was not love. When we fell from our consciousness into this misunderstanding, which also was obviously the fall of our structure, our spinal cord, our multidimensional self, all of it, you can think of it like a broken tower. And I think some of the stories we had, like about the Tower of Babble, I think all those stories were actually telling us how we lost connection to the divine self through the fall of our multidimensional spine. So originally, when we would come to a planet like this, which was perfect, and it was a whole complete world which had perfect conditions, we would come here not to fix something. We would come here to experience our consciousness. And we knew that to create, we would be using our higher mind, which is the mind of our divine self, through inspiration, but ultimately we would be expressing our creative, unique inspiration into this world through the heart. So everything that would be birthed into this world would be birthed through love. And that was actually the original idea. Birthing through love. So there was a communication between the heart and the higher mind. Together, they would give birth to like new creative patterns that would then be projected by the heart, but also by the higher mind together. And just like as if you had a projector in your heart, you would be projecting these love-inspired ideas onto the mirror of this world. And then the world, because third dimension, there was nothing wrong with the third dimension until it was trapped. So third dimension was about truly creating something so physical, like a sculpture, like a painting. And it was supposed to be very exciting. So as long as the being was fully connected to that love and fully connected to the divine self and the mind within the divine self, then it would be like reaching into your divine self, bringing through inspiration, and for the heart to transmit it onto the mirror of this world, and then the world would show it to you. So you would always see something amazing. It would always be like, wow, creation, I'm seeing beauty, I'm creating incredibly beautiful, harmonious patterns. And then we would not stop, because creativity fuels creation. Creativity is actually a super important quality within creation, and actually it's fundamental to the expansion of cosmos. Creativity. So in cosmic terms, the beings are not interested in creating sameness. Let's say you create a galaxy, and then you create a galaxy, and they should not be the same. That would be boring. And creativity is there to actually provide for variety, uniqueness, new expressions of consciousness. And so the idea is that all beings have the power to create, and they have creative minds, the higher mind, and the heart then is like a trumpet of creation, and it projects those creative ideas onto the canvas of a world, and in our case that would be the earth, and then it can always be expanded into more. So you go from beauty into more beauty, from harmony into more harmony, from perfection into more perfection. And there is no dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction was introduced by the forces of darkness. So how did this design then fail, and how the relationship between us and creation was reversed? Many people, when they see this, they describe this as a reversal in the matrix, and that's exactly what happened. Instead of the being that is you and me being fully always in power, knowing that creation comes from the higher mind of the divine self, it is channeled through the heart as love, and it is always a reflection of this amazing inspiration, then through the fall, this relationship got reversed. And it was introduced by the forces of darkness, that they introduced imperfection into the mix, dissatisfaction into the mix. So first of all, during the fall, the connection to the divine self was severed. Not eternally, but it was like chopping a pipe into pieces. And the pipe used to have a flow of the spirit within itself. But once you cut the pipe, you now actually severed the connection. And it would take so much effort to restore it through meditation, through doing your Kriya Yoga, through many different lifetimes. And sometimes even that was not a guarantee that the connection could be restored. That's how broken the connection was. So the waters of the spirit were not flowing. So when they were not flowing, the heart center also was incredibly diminished. The flow of life force within even the human body was blocked by design. And it was blocked by those beings that we spoke about, who put two major blockages within the human body. The number one blockage, and those were actually implants, was at the base of the spine. So that's where basically you would get your life force, and that created the dormant kundalini, that created the sleeping serpent within. And then the second blockage as an implant would be placed in the medulla oblongata, so basically the brainstem. And so these two blockages then created what we today know as the dysfunction of humankind, because basically life force was not flowing enough for us to sustain constantly expanded consciousness, but it was blocked to basically keep us always in survival. And even when people thought they were thriving, they still had these blockages inside of them. So, you know, even good conditions on the outside were not a reflection of thriving life force within. So when that happened, then the human being reversed the relationship between creation and themselves. And this is what all of us got to experience in this lifetime. We've seen it in our grandparents, we've seen it in our parents, we've seen it in all the generations that we can think back, because it goes back to actually millions of years. So then what happened? Then the human being would look around and say, oh, this is reality. It would say, I like it or I don't like it. And then it would say, I don't want this or I want this. I want more of this, but I want less of this. And it would build an emotional and mental reaction to that which is on the outside. And that was the fallen design that everyone got trapped by in this matrix. It's genius, but not in a good way. But it's definitely, it worked, didn't it? So it worked because we all would look around and say, this is reality. And either we like it or we don't like it. Sometimes we would even hate it. And sometimes we would cry about it. And sometimes we would get so happy about it. And that's why the yogis always told us, even the pleasure as well as the pain are equally a trap, as long as we see it as a reality that can in any way control us. And of course, we all got controlled by the reality, didn't we? And it's just good to admit it, because I don't know, maybe Yogananda was the only being that I can think of that was able not to be controlled by reality. Because we then had to be always outside the box. The box, the false matrix, was very, very tempting. The good and the bad, both, and equally. And so that is why even the pleasure and the joy of something in this reality, was considered by the yogis equally detrimental. Even though it seemed like, of course, we all want joy. Jesus, of course, you know, all the big beings, they figured it out because they could see the trap, which was, as long as we react to the false matrix with our emotion and our mind in terms of preference, we are trapped by it. When I first saw this, I saw it through Yogananda's assistance when we called in the creator of all that is. And it was clear that this was the trap. Of course, Babaji, and you know, so many. I can think of also Ananda Mai, who was not trapped by the matrix, because the only way not to be trapped by it, to be beyond it. And that means to constantly be one with the divine self, one with the I am presence, one with the immortal part of us, one with the one who was never born and will never die. Yes, Jujana, great point. And then we started to fight. And that is where it got really interesting. Imagine us all facing a big movie theater screen, all of us, humanity. And we are the ones who are projecting reality onto that screen. We are the projectors, but we forgot. And so imagine all of us then pointing the fist at the screen, saying, I don't like you. Or seeing a nice condition on the screen and saying, oh, I want more of you. Now I'm happy because the condition on the screen looks so good. But now I'm not happy because it's gone. And now I'm happy again. And now I'm not happy. And so that's what we all have done. But now is the end of it. Now, because the false matrix is going to dissolve, and it is dissolving, it still is with a delay. We have to know everything is a mirror reflection of something that existed in the past. We actually never got to know the now. We only got to know the result of the past. Everything in our lives, whether it is personal or collective, had to always be a reflection of something that existed in the past. So what we see here today, whatever it is that we see now, is a reflection of something that happened in the past. The only way to go beyond it is to actually close your eyelids and go into the nothingness of the mind. The mind, as we have known it, was part of the big dysfunction. The mind was creating a relationship with the past in the mirror. All the thoughts, and I would say most of them, if not all, were simply thoughts based upon what we saw in the mirror and whether we liked it or not, whether we wanted more of it or less of it. And then we thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Sometimes we kept saying, you know, I don't want this, and what if this happens? All of that was part of the false matrix. Yes, the pendulum that kept swinging. The only way that in the past we could have exited the matrix was by complete nothingness in the mind, no feeling or emotion about it, basically emotion, and then being in your independent state of love, but also nothingness in the lower human mind. As children, that was how we arrived in this world and existed for several years. And that's why be like a child to enter the queendom of heaven, which is outside of this matrix. Isn't that amazing? When we were little kids, our bodies were receiving the life force from nature and the intelligence, especially if we got to play outside, which again, you can see how the false matrix wanted to stop the kids from playing outside, how the school system was created so that they disconnect from the intelligence that flows through them, so that no one is true to themselves. Everybody became a robot, really, controlled by all these systems that were against us. The systems were created to be against our true nature. Yes. Yeah, so, you know, we've had, obviously, thank you, Gurga, for pointing out all the great masters who were able to go beyond the matrix. So now, in this lifetime, this year is the end of all of this. But of course, what we still see on the outside is the result of the past that needs to dissolve. And that's why we use the, you know, different cleansing techniques that we have, whether it is working with the golden light of God, the violet flame of God. I got to see the violet flame for the first time in 2006, but the way that I received the violet flame, it happened in Berlin actually, was that it was the light of our divine self. And so once the divine self descended upon, which happens through the crown, incredible amount of creativity awakens in the person when it happens, and they become unbelievably creative. And so to me, that was the violet light of the divine self descending down and igniting the true, actually, gift that we all have. And that is to be a creator being and to create and to create and to create and to look at everything as simply a result and then say, oh, this painting is not as beautiful as I wanted it to be. So I'll simply go within, close my eyes, and I'll meditate a new solution without having a reaction to what is. And of course, that was so hard. Again, I've always been teaching the 4 steps by Yogananda, where he doesn't care so much about the karma. He was just saying, number one, clean yourself every day. Be a clean, energetic system, and don't even worry about what happened yesterday. He taught me that. When I first met him in the physical reality in 2010, I was filled with, kind of regret. I thought to myself, even though I've meditated for thousands of hours, once I met him in person, I said to myself, I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough. And he immediately stopped me and he said to me, I don't care at all about anything that happened in the past. He said, all I care about is where you will go from today. And that to us, I think to all of us, could be incredibly liberating. He had an incredible attitude in which he simply gave all the past, whether it was good or bad, he would give it to Divine Mother, he would give it to Divine Father. And then all he was concerned about is, how am I moving forward? But even like mistakes to him were not really, important. It was like, just keep going, do your best, keep going. That's it. And so the simple technique that he had was give it all to Divine Mother and say, sorry, it's all yours. I'm moving forward. So how do we now move forward? So this is the lifetime that is the most exciting that I can imagine that we came here for. And that is when this big change happens. This big change, we have to remember, is within. If we want to see it on the outside, we are the projectors of it. So if we want to go to the old self, we have the free will to choose so. If we want to listen within and hear what is within us, then the new will be projected through us. As you know, we now have, I would call it like, they give us titles in higher realms. So I would say the first title that we have is Architects of the New Earth. Architects. What is an architect? If you are an architect, then you know the details of what goes into architecture. That means we need a design. If I don't have a design within myself, how do I think this reality will come into being? It will be completely haphazard, random, the result of something I didn't even think about. But if I want something that requires design, like a galaxy, if that's what it is that we are creating, we need a design. So we are the architects of the new earth. So every day, spend a few moments designing. It is important. Creation will happen any which way. Creation will happen any which way. But without a design, it will be random. And it will be as random as our thoughts are. It will be as random as this world has been. But if we want something different, then it's a good idea to actually design it. Like I said, I met beings who are in charge of designing galaxies. And personally, I didn't find it all that it's not my next logical step to be designing galaxies. But if it is your next logical step, then you can think, how are you going to design your galaxy? But for me right now, I feel kind of in this world, there is a lot of potential for what it is that we can bring. And because the future already exists also, since we are on a spiral of evolution, we simply can be inspired by those who have maybe seen the future if we feel that that's a good outcome. And so the future that I have seen, that was one of the actually great outcomes, is when all beings in this world have fully open, functioning heart centers. And then everyone simply is inspired by the divine self, and everyone projects love onto the canvas of this reality. And that could be a loving design for education, a loving design for leadership, a loving design for housing, how we all, integrate in nature. It could be a loving design for the clean elements. One of the big things that the forces of darkness did for this world, they wanted us to live in a very depleted world. Why? They knew really well that consciousness is emanated by nature. They knew this. And so deliberately, they were poisoning nature, the soils, the waters, the air. It was very deliberate, so that nature cannot be at her best to give us information, because we would not be able to receive her. The other things that these forces of darkness really wanted is to keep us in bodies that no longer have their innate intelligence. Low vibe, low thinking, low environment, low housing, low schooling, low jobs, low money. All of it was by design. And I mentioned before that, there are many different layers to who these beings were. And I don't know that I met all of them, but I met many different levels of these beings, because they didn't like when someone would be doing their Kriya Yoga and succeeding. They didn't like it when someone would be leaving the body and going outside of the matrix. They really didn't want anyone to see them. And so I can tell you that they didn't like us. And that's, I always compare it to like a very evil stepmother who doesn't like her children. And so that was the kind of relationship these beings had with us. They wouldn't want to kill us because we have life force, but they wanted to keep us as low as possible. And so now it is about bringing the solutions that are within us now in a whole new state of freedom. I mentioned that actually in the email, that there is an aspect of Divine Mother, which we call the goddess of freedom. And this goddess, and I cannot tell you that these beings fully incarnate here, I don't think so. But when they incarnate a big chunk of their energy through someone or through many. And the goddess of freedom is here on planet Earth, incarnated. And so a lot of freedom, that's going to be the movement now. Freedom will be the new trajectory for humanity, obviously. So freedom, and this is freedom we have not known since the fall of Mu. The illusion of freedom was given to us. All the political systems, you are free, you are in the land of free. No, never. There has been no land that was ever truly free since the fall of Mu. But the illusion of it was part of the design. And I call it, how do you prevent revolt? You prevent it by giving the illusion of freedom. So let's say 99.9% of people think that they are free. They will not revolt because they will not be looking for the ones who run the show, because the ones who run the show were invisible. So now the freedom that we have not known since the fall of Mu is going to be created through us in this world. It's good to know these big changes, because obviously if I look now at, literature or philosophies that were given to us in the last, even if we look 12,000 years, we will not find the new, because the new is here now, and we are the architects of the new earth. And also we are now becoming masters of energy. and energy also in the physical sense. That's why now I actually will be conducting research, scientific research. Yogananda liked it that we actually go into the world and we become, the divine scientists that can actually unveil the truth of what it means to be a superhuman, divine human. And so what we will be returning to as these masters of energy is breath and how to breathe divine energy from our divine self, sound, which includes mantra, chanting, singing, movement, which I think the number one movement that will return to our consciousness is very similar to Qigong, or to like spontaneous movement, dance, flowing with the elements. Meditation will be also different, and it will be not what it used to be, because before it was like hard work to get somewhere. Now it's about daily attuning to the divine self. We will be using our mind differently, and instead of the recycling of the thoughts, we will be visualizing, and we will be creating solutions from the divine self as visuals. So being able to imagine, visualize. And then one of the big tools that we have, and we always had, is smiling. And that is just simply creating new chemistry within us, being that smile millionaire that Yogananda talked about. So to be a superhuman, I'm going to review again and repeat these different elements. A lot of our spirituality was part of the fallen matrix and the trap, so it was also misleading us. So let's look at the holistic approach to being a superhuman moving forward. The bodies have been now liberated from these big interferences. That means we will feel new life force, new well-being. Every molecule of life is new now. As you know, during the World Congress, we were shedding all the cloaks of darkness around our electrons. So now, to fully use who we are, we want to be using a holistic approach. Breath, that means not only just breathing, without being conscious about it, but having moments throughout the day when you say, my breath is how I move into my subtle body. And then I can make contact with Divine Mother and with Divine Father through my breath. Sound. Normally we just talk or don't talk. But sound, for many of you, you use, for example, Om, you use some mantras, and maybe some chanting, whatever that is. It is good to step outside of just speaking or not speaking. Creating sounds that create vibration, not only in our brain, but also in the field around us. And they are magical sounds. Movement, essential. Moving in a way that is not typical. Typical would be sitting, standing, walking, sleeping, laying down. But for example, I highly recommend learning some Qigong, doing some Qigong, or simply allowing your body to move the way it wants to move, but something unusual. It's very, very good for reconnecting the right and left hemisphere, which is part of the change in the body. Different functioning. And then meditation. Nothing too crazy. Think of meditation now as a moment you have with the divine, and you are just attuning yourself, not to some ascended masters. I now recommend going directly to your divine self and no longer to someone else, but just your divine self, divine self. Good morning, divine self. Here I am. I'm going to just close my eyes and attune to you, because you are the highest self. And then as Yogananda said recently in the video that we made, the daily strength, that he, for example, speaks only through the divine self. So it's not speaking to you as an external source, but through your divine self, your true self to you. So that's the way we want to build these relationships. Then using the mind to visualize and imagine every day. And you can use a journal and you can put it down, in your journal, the way you see it, but always knowing reality will mirror to us with a delay what we think about and what we visualize. And so why not to visualize amazing things for yourself and this collective, including working on the 5 elements, which we really need to, and that is clean air, clean soil, clean water. And that's it. Yes, wonderful. My divine self, I want to merge with you every day. As Yogananda said, there's only one thing to really ask for, and that is for the divine self to always be with you. And he said, be thou with me always. That's it, every day. The number one condition, be thou with me always. That's it. And then everything else is an inspiration. So inspiration might come, of course, from the divine self, and it could be requiring action. If the divine self will inspire you to move into action, then you will take action. No longer taking action without the divine self. So now it's like, yes, you might be inspired to take a lot of action, but it will come as inspiration from the divine self. Personally, I find the physical body, has changed so much with our new DNA. And you know that we have new DNA. A lot of people are now speaking about dragons. It really did happen to us. And that is that we are the seeds of the Elohim. We are the seeds of the Elohim. The Elohim refer to that DNA as the dragon DNA. I see more and more people all around the world suddenly talking about dragons, and it sounds a little bit fantastical, but at the basic, very practical level, we now have new DNA. And this is so huge. We no longer have the old, hypnotized, dysfunctional, limited DNA, which anyway was manipulated by the forces of darkness. So now we are these walking fields of solutions. How amazing is that? And for that, the body will be changing. You will notice new senses, new taste, new hearing, new seeing. All of it is happening. But also, the body will want to balance again its balance, and that means the right and left hemisphere. So again, if you can help it, start using both hands as much as you can equally, because we are returning the balance to the brain centers. You might find this interesting, and I find it, fascinating that when the planetary grid of the Earth became dysfunctional, the body too became actually dysfunctional, because it was through the physical body that we would be plugged in to the planetary grid. You can think of it as the health of the planet. When the planet was healthy, the body was healthy. When the planet became sick, the body became sick. One of the things that became sick is actually our nervous system. For all of us, whether we knew it or not, we ended up with diminished functioning of the right and left hemisphere. We ended up with diminished senses, and we ended up with diminished brain centers, such as the pineal gland. And so then we no longer could perceive the divine reality. The world lost her healthy planetary grid. And so our bodies lost their healthy physical grid system that we would call our health. So instead of thriving, it was very much surviving without knowing it. And when something is how everybody is, we call it normal. But again, far from natural. Now, the planetary grid has been a huge, actually, element of planetary ascension. And I'm just going to mention this, and then we will be complete for today. Why did so many people work on the planetary grid? Why did we have so many grid workers? Why did people go to these different portals? It is being recorded, and I'll post it next week. And so it was because we knew that as long as the earth is sick, we too will be sick. And I don't mean necessarily truly like sickness, like a health. It was an energetic sickness. And that's why, for example, if you're curious about this, we had the yogis who would go against the sickness in the body and they would restore themselves from within. They would do all that it takes to become complete from within in the world that was not complete. So, in order to actually ascend a planet, we needed to reconnect her first with the grid of her own being, which is the planetary grid. And then we needed to actually work outside of this planet, which I'm pretty certain that many of you worked on this project without maybe even knowing it. But we would at night, out of body, go to these grids and we would be working on reconnecting also what we would call the universal grids. And those would be the grids between planets and stars and suns so that they can communicate with each other. And so the planetary grid is a huge part of the ascension process. And so once again, the planetary grid got healed on August 14th this year. So think about it. The field of healthy energy that we are in now. And now this new DNA is plugged into this planetary grid and it connects us all around the world. And we are now the solution bringers. Yes, there is also a solar grid of our galaxy. All is interconnected through these grids. All of life. And the earth was disconnected to be in the illusion because we call it, after all, the false matrix. So now, truly, you are, as you know, a walking field of solutions. The web of life is intact now. And so now it's about attuning to this amazing possibility that is here within us. And so it is. And so we will repeat this at 5 p.m. today, Pacific, and then we will have a break in September. I will be traveling and back in October. So it's really amazing what's unfolding here through all of us on this planet. So many blessings to everyone. And again, we are now interconnected through this beautiful planetary grid. And within it, we are the walking fields of solutions. So thank you so much and many blessings.